To the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is adulting. So many of us live from the stories of our past, and there's a time where we have the opportunity or the awareness or the grace to be able to choose to live beyond the oppressions of our past, our upbringing, the wrongs and the violations, whatever we want to call them, of the past, and take responsibility for the quality of our lives and how we live our lives. And we can call that process adulting. And that's what we're going to be looking at, talking about today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to start the day with you. And welcome to everyone else who's joining us. We're talking about adulting. So there may be a way that we can be looking at life in at least two phases, but in this context, two phases. One where we are at the effect of life, and one where we take ownership of life. And so when we're being raised, we're subject to the messaging of our environment. We're being taught what the world is by our parents. We're being taught who we are, and our school and our community, but whatever the environment is that we're living in, that's where we're getting our primary messaging about how the world works and who we are in it. And oftentimes the messages that we receive are hurtful. Oftentimes those messages are messages that diminish us and that provide all kinds of limits and constraints and biases, and it's sort of unavoidable. But the thing is that we don't know any different. It's our only environment. We're being given these messages as though they're truth, and we absorb them in that way because we don't have another point of reference. And we often suffer as a result of these messages. If we're told that we're not good enough, or we're told that we need to just follow in lockstep, or we're told that we're too much, we absorb these messages and we suffer from them oftentimes. And there is a point at which we have experienced enough of life to have comparisons, to have contrasts, to notice that maybe these truths, maybe we have the moment of grace enough to be able to question these foundational assumptions that may have been invisible. Maybe we even get to see these assumptions that had been invisible because we didn't know they were assumptions. They were unquestioned. They were just an is in the universe. And then things happen that we get to start questioning those things. Or at least we become aware that perhaps we can question those things. You know, that the truths that we have absorbed may not be true or may not be the only truth. And so it's that awareness and that willingness to take ownership of our own stories, to say, yes, this was given to me, and now I get to choose. I get to choose whether it's true or not. I get to be accountable for the life that I live, for the reactivity that I have, for the experience. In other words, in another way, we can be thinking of it as moving from victimhood to empowerment, where we can own responsibility, take sovereignty of our lives, rather than being a product of something else. You know, that in one case where we're being the product, we are constantly at the effect of it. When we recognize that we have responsibility, it's like, yeah, all that happened. And what am I going to do with it? How am I going to integrate that in my life? How am I going to express myself in my life beyond whatever those things are that happened? Whatever those beliefs were that I was infused with. And it's that choice, that movement that I'm today at least calling adulting, where we become our own people. And it doesn't mean that we, in that choice, automatically become free of all the influences that shaped us, but it's that we take ownership for it. And we then, in taking ownership, provide ourselves with choices that previously would have been invisible to us. Hello, Peggy. Welcome. Wonderful to have you joining us this morning. We're talking about adulting. We're really talking about our own sovereignty, our own willingness and courage and opportunity to take responsibility, to take ownership of our lives and ourselves and our patterns. And yes, it may be that our patterns and our wounds were created from external circumstances, but there's a point where we get to be responsible for them. Where we get to stop blaming somebody else or circumstances for the quality of our lives and choose to embrace what we are, how we are, and from that space, move into whatever it is we are choosing to become. So one aspect here is looking backwards, where we're tied and bound and oppressed by our history, by the past. And the other is owning that as our own, and then giving ourselves the power to transform it, to release it, to evolve. It's a very empowering action or choice to say, okay, this happened in my life. Now what? What am I going to do with it? How am I empowered? How am I empowering myself to utilize my will, my choice to move into my potentials? The thing that I've witnessed over and over and over again with clients is that what was our oppression in our lives becomes a source of power. So often we're able to find our greatest strengths from the deepest tragedies in our lives. Often the tragedies, the hardships, the suffering of our lives provides the seed for our becoming our highest and most expressed selves. And it's not something that happens immediately. It's not something that, oh, here's a hardship and bam, now I'm going to transmute and transform it. This is another thing that I see in working with clients, because I work with people that are really powerful transformers, powerfully able to transform a negative into a positive or to neutralize things. The thing is about that we can do that transformation in such a way that it's actually kind of denial. Like the underlying dynamic is still there, the underlying feeling, the underlying pain, it just gets buried or it gets washed over with some kind of positive twist without moving through whatever the foundational thing is. It just remains there as an irritant until we actually can dissolve it. We can talk ourselves out of things, but that can take a shape of denial also. And it doesn't, just because I can talk myself out of something for the moment doesn't mean that that underlying issue has dissolved. It just means that I've managed to subvert it, at least for this moment. And it will show up again for me to subvert again and for me to try to redirect again. But it doesn't necessarily address the foundational issue. So there's a timing to this transformation or transmutation of our deep emotion, our trauma. We get to go through it. We get to experience the emotions of it, allow those emotions to move. It's like when there's a loss, it's important to allow for the grief and not to just move right along into all the justifications or rationalizations or thinking that will justify it or try to put a wash over that grief. For instance, we get to grieve, and then we also get to move beyond that. And it is a process. It's not something that happens immediately. And owning the emotions of a circumstance is also part of adulting. Like allowing the emotions without becoming stuck in them, without creating stories around them, but to feel them, to feel where they are in our bodies, to allow that energy of that emotion to move through, to actually process through. When we avoid those emotions, we tend to tamp them down, we tend to bury them, and what happens is when they're buried, they fester. So part of adulting is getting in at least in this conversation, is getting to a place where we can move beyond blame. And that's a challenging thing. It can be a very challenging thing, because when we blame, we are ascribing responsibility to somebody else for our well-being. And if we're not doing so well, it's easier to blame somebody else for that than to take ownership, to take responsibility. The thing is, when we do take ownership, when we do take responsibility, that's the only way that we have power in our lives. As long as we make someone else responsible for our situation, we don't have to be responsible, right? We don't have to then say, yeah, but it's my life. At some point, we can recognize it's my life. And given that it's my life, how am I going to curate it? How am I going to curate my story in such a way that it is life affirming? How am I going to create the context for my life? The stories that we tell about our lives, about the people in our lives, about the circumstances in our lives, are profoundly impactful on our lived experience. So I was talking to a client the other day, and they were talking about how their parents really set the kids up in a way that was damaging. They actually said our parents really screwed us over. That was the language. And we were able to explore the story and another way to write that same story that was empowering, because what they realized was, had that circumstance not been as bad as it had been, they would not have taken the steps that they took to create a separate path for themselves. They would not have broken away from the family. There were certain toxic elements, and in their breaking away, they became a haven, a safe haven for other members of the family that were also suffering the toxic effects of other family members. So what they got to recognize is, had the situation not been as bad as it had been, they would not have become the pillar of the family, the safe haven that they became. It's a very different story. It's kind of saying, okay, it was really, really bad. And because it was really, really bad, it prompted me to become the strength that I have become. And the feeling of that story versus my parents really screwed me over, there's a very different experience of those two stories. And the person that we are living from those two different stories is going to show up differently in the world. And so it is profoundly important how we curate our stories. And that story, the new story, to me, is what, again, in this context, I'm calling adulting, is taking ownership and not being the victim, but recognizing our strengths, being able to find the things that have been our greatest challenges and transform and transmute them into our gifts that have shaped us, gifts that have contributed to our becoming. So there, the two phases, one is the victimhood, the blame, poor me, my parents screwed me over, and I'm suffering, and I'm going to suffer forever, versus this is my life. How can I look at this story in a way that actually forwards my life, forwards my expression, empowers me to move into my greater potentials? How can I recognize that these hardships were the seeds of my becoming, the seeds of my capacity? I used to say all the time, and I really don't like this expression so much anymore, but I used to say, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it's not really true. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger if you choose to allow yourself to become strong, if you choose to use it in a way that strengthens you. And so we don't necessarily want to be hotly pursuing things that could kill us in order to become stronger. But we do have the ability, and it's sort of a magic power, to transform and transmute these situations and these circumstances of our lives into something that gives us life rather than something that sucks that life out of us. And curating our stories, crafting our stories in such a way that they give us that power, that they give us that strength, they give us that energy, is a profound gift that we can give ourselves. And I'm talking here about adulting as something where we take ownership of our lives, of our own lives, and as something that we get to create. And some of us never get to that phase. Adulting in this context is not something that is in any way age determined, because we can live into victimhood our entire lives. The invitation is to look at the stories that you tell and feel into their impact on your being. Feel into their impact on the way you feel, the possibilities that are open to you. And if you find that the story that you have at this moment is disempowering, know that you have the power to rewrite it. So you get to author your life. And that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like and follow me and Enlightened World Network. The links are in the description. And as always, it is such a privilege and a pleasure and a gift to be able to have these morning musings together. I'm so grateful to you for going on these journeys and being willing to explore what it is to be human. So until next time, so much